The first time my roommate asked me how her new dress looked, I stared at her for a second too long. Not because the dress was revealing. It wasn't. It was just different. And the way she was looking at me made me realize that she'd noticed something I was trying very hard to hide. She smiled and said, "Want a better look?" I laughed. But inside, I knew I was already in trouble. My name is Ethan. I was 26 at the time, living in a small 2-bedroom apartment outside Charlotte, North Carolina. I worked at a shipping company during the day and picked up extra hours whenever I could. It wasn't an exciting life. Work, groceries, bills, laundry, Netflix on Friday nights. That was pretty much me. Until my roommate moved in. Her name was Claire. And before anyone asks, no, we weren't dating. We weren't even close at first. Claire had been a friend of my best friend, Marcus. When her previous roommate suddenly moved out, Marcus asked if she could take the spare room in my apartment for a few months. I said yes because I needed help with rent. That was the practical reason. At least, that's what I told myself. Claire was 25. Quiet. Funny in a very dry way. The kind of person who could make one sentence sound like a joke without changing her expression. She also had this habit of humming when she cooked. Not loudly. Just enough for me to hear it from the living room. At first, I barely noticed her. We had separate lives. She worked at a dental office. I worked early mornings. She liked going out. I usually wanted to sleep. We'd pass each other in the kitchen and say things like, "Morning. Hey, you using the coffee maker?" Nope. That was it. Simple. Easy. Then the little things started changing. She began leaving her grocery list on the fridge. I started adding things to it as a joke. "Don't forget cereal." She'd cross it out. Then she'd write, "I'm an adult." The next morning, I'd find a box of cereal sitting on my shelf. Stuff like that. Nothing important. Except somehow those little moments became the best part of my day. One night, we were sitting on the balcony after work. She had her feet tucked underneath her and was staring at the street below. She suddenly asked, "Do you ever feel like you're waiting for your life to actually start?" I looked at her. "Pretty much every day." She smiled. Good. Thought it was just me. That conversation lasted maybe 20 minutes. But I remembered it for months. Because that was the first time I realized Claire wasn't just my roommate. She was lonely too. And somehow, that made me feel less lonely. After that, we started talking more. About work. Family. Bad relationships. Things we regretted. Things we wanted but were too scared to chase. Sometimes we'd sit in the kitchen until 2 in the morning. Neither of us wanting to be the first person to say, "I should go to bed." And I started noticing things I probably shouldn't have noticed. The way she laughed when she was genuinely surprised. The way she'd bite back a smile when she was pretending to be annoyed. The way she'd say my name when she wanted me to take something seriously. I tried not to think about it. Because there was one rule I kept repeating in my head. She was my roommate. And, more importantly, she was connected to Marcus. I didn't want to destroy the friendship. I didn't want to destroy the apartment. And I definitely didn't want to become the guy who fell for his roommate. So I ignored it. Or tried to. Then came the dress. It was a Thursday night. I had just gotten home from work. Claire was standing near the hallway mirror. She'd apparently bought a new dress for a work event. She looked at herself in the mirror. Then looked at me. "What do you think?" I looked up from my phone. And froze. It wasn't some dramatic movie moment. I just looked too long. She noticed. Of course she noticed. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Then she smiled. "Want a better look?" I immediately looked away. "No. I mean, it looks good." She laughed. "That's all?" "Yeah." "Wow." She walked into the kitchen. "You're really bad at compliments." I said, "It looks good." You stared at me for 5 seconds. I did not. You absolutely did. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. But that night, something changed. Not between us exactly. Inside me. Because now I knew she knew. And once someone knows what you're trying to hide, it's almost impossible to hide it again. The next morning, things felt slightly awkward. Not bad. Just different. She made coffee. I stood beside the counter. Neither of us said much. Finally, she looked at me. "Ethan." "Yeah? You don't have to act weird." "I'm not acting weird." "You are." I smiled. "Okay. Maybe a little." She looked down at her coffee. Then quietly said, "I liked the way you looked at me." I didn't know what to say. So I said nothing. And somehow, that was worse. Over the next few weeks, we became closer. But we also became more careful. We'd start conversations and suddenly stop. Sometimes she'd sit beside me on the couch. Then she'd move away. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me. And she'd look away first. Neither of us said anything. It felt like we were both standing near a door. Neither of us wanted to open it. But neither of us wanted to walk away either. And honestly, if you've been enjoying the story so far, I'd really appreciate it if you liked the video and subscribed. I don't usually talk about things like this. So it means more than you probably realize. Anyway, the night everything changed started with a storm. A bad one. The power went out around midnight. The apartment went completely dark. Claire came out of her room holding her phone. Please tell me you have candles. I have a flashlight. That isn't a candle. It lights up. She laughed. We ended up sitting on the living room floor because the couch was right next to the window and the storm was getting louder. For some reason, we started talking. Really talking. Claire told me she'd been thinking about leaving Charlotte. She said she felt stuck. I told her I understood. Then she asked, "Do you ever think you're scared of being happy?" I looked at her. What? She shrugged. Sometimes I think I keep people at a distance because if I never let them get close, they can't leave. I didn't answer immediately. Because I understood exactly what she meant. Then she looked at me. And you? I took a breath. I think I'm scared of wanting something I shouldn't. She went quiet. The storm kept hitting the windows. Neither of us moved. Finally, she whispered, "Maybe wanting something doesn't make it wrong." I looked at her. She looked back. And for a second, everything else disappeared. I leaned closer. She didn't move away. The kiss was brief. Almost hesitant. And the second it happened, we both pulled back. Neither of us smiled. Neither of us celebrated. Because we both knew what it meant. Claire whispered, "This is a bad idea." I know. We live together. I know. And Marcus would hate this. I know. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "That doesn't mean I don't want it." That sentence stayed with me. Because it sounded like permission. But it wasn't. It was a warning. The next morning, we barely spoke. I went to work early. When I came home, Claire wasn't there. She didn't answer my texts. Around 9 that night, I heard keys at the door. Claire walked in. She looked exhausted. Then she said, "Marcus knows." My stomach dropped. What? He called me. I sat down. What did he say? She shook her head. He asked if something was going on between us. I couldn't speak. She looked at me. I didn't tell him. Why? I don't know. Then her eyes filled with tears. And she said something I'll never forget. "I think I didn't tell him because I knew that if I said it out loud, I'd have to decide whether you were worth losing him over." That hurt more than I expected. Because I knew the answer. I wasn't. Not because I didn't care about her. But because I knew how much Marcus meant to both of us. We spent the next few days barely speaking. Then Claire got an email. She'd been offered a job in Denver. The kind of job she'd wanted for years. She accepted. 2 weeks later, she was leaving. I told her I was happy for her. She smiled. But neither of us believed me. The night before she left, we sat on the balcony again. The same place where she'd once asked me if I felt like my life hadn't started yet. She said, "Do you remember that conversation?" "Yeah. I think I was waiting for someone to make me feel like I wasn't stuck." I looked at her. And did I? She smiled sadly. For a little while. That answer broke something in me. The next morning, her room was empty. The apartment felt twice as big. There was a note on the kitchen counter. I didn't open it immediately. I was scared of what it might say. When I finally did, it was only one sentence. "You were never a mistake, Ethan." The timing was. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it and put it in my wallet. Months passed. I eventually moved into a different apartment. I stopped talking about Claire. Life went back to normal. Or something close to normal. Then, almost a year later, I saw her again. At a coffee shop. She was with someone. A guy. They looked happy. She noticed me. We smiled at each other. We talked for maybe 2 minutes. Nothing dramatic. No confession. No goodbye speech. Just 2 people pretending the past didn't still exist. Before she left, she said, "I hope you're doing okay." I said, "I'm good." She nodded. Then she walked away. That night, I opened my wallet and found the old note. I had forgotten about it. But there was something else behind it. A second piece of paper. One I'd never seen before. It was in Claire's handwriting. I don't know when she wrote it. Maybe she left it there without meaning to. Maybe she changed her mind. It said, "I think I loved you a little. But I think I loved the life I could have had with you even more." I sat there for a long time. And suddenly, every little moment made sense. The coffee. The late-night conversations. The balcony. The dress. The way she looked at me that night. Maybe none of it was supposed to become a relationship. Maybe some people enter your life just long enough to show you what you're capable of feeling. And then they leave. Not because the feeling wasn't real, but because real feelings don't always lead to the right ending. I still have that note. I don't read it often. But sometimes, when I'm alone, I think about that night she asked how her dress looked. And I remember the way she smiled when she realized I'd stared too long. Back then, I thought that was the moment everything began. Now I think it was the moment we both quietly realized it would eventually end. And maybe that's why, years later, I still remember the exact way she looked at me that night, because some people don't break your heart by leaving, they break it by showing you what staying could have felt like.